God's prophets in general history, who built the great Egyptian pyramids? To this day, the answer to this question remains a mystery. Did Alexander the Great have anything to do with building the Great Pyramids? Especially since he was the owner of the building of the Temple of Petra or the Temple of Solomon? To answer this question requires a great focus on what historians wrote, especially the historian Herodotus in the 5th century BC. And after him the historian Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BC. There is confusion in understanding historical texts. This is the title of the answer to the question. The first historian to write about the Egyptian pyramids was the Greek historian Herodotus. He was the one who gave the pharaonic names to the Great Pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the Second Pyramid of Khafre, and the Third Pyramid of Menkaure. This was written by Herodotus in the 5th century BC. About 200 years before Alexander the Great arrived in Egypt. When Herodotus visited Egypt, he saw the Egyptian pyramids and gave a description of them. This is an important thing, and all that is required of us is to focus on what Herodotus wrote in describing the great pyramids that he saw, because we will compare what Herodotus saw on the pyramids and what exists currently. That is, did Herodotus describe the Great Pyramids of Giza or describe other pyramids? Many people do not know that Egypt has more than 100 pyramids, and therefore Herodotus did not describe the Great Pyramids of Giza, but rather he described the Pyramids of Dahshur. These pyramids are 25 miles away from the Great Pyramids. And this is the first confusion that occurred among historians and archaeologists. First note, no mention of the Sphinx in front of the Great Pyramids of Giza. There is a statue of the Sphinx, which is a statue that represents power in the form of a lion and a human head that represents science. That is, the statue represents power and science together. This statue was not mentioned by Herodotus in his book when he came to Egypt, even though the Sphinx is in front of the pyramids. A second note is that he described the Great Pyramid as being among the Great Pyramids and mentioned that it was surrounded by a small pyramid. However, this does not apply to the Great Pyramid, which is surrounded by 3 small pyramids. Rather, it applies to the Great Pyramid of Dahshur, which is called the Bent Pyramid, which is located in front of a small pyramid. Text of Herodotus' book, Cheops, Khafre, moreover came, they said, to such a pitch of wickedness, that being in want of money, he caused his own daughter to sit in the stews, and ordered her to obtain from those who came a certain amount of money. How much it was they did not tell me, and she not only obtained the sum appointed by her father, but also she formed a design for herself privately to leave behind her a memorial. And she requested each man who came in to give her 1 stone upon her building, and of these stones, they told me, the pyramid was built which stands in front of the Great Pyramid, in the middle of the 3, each side being 150 feet in length. As a third note, he noted that the second pyramid was made with different colored stones, as opposed to the Great Pyramids, which were all made with the same type of stone. Text of Herodotus' book, this Cheops, the Egyptian said, reigned 50 years, and after he was dead his brother Chephren succeeded to the kingdom. This king followed the same manner of dealing as the other, both in all the rest and also in that he made a pyramid, not indeed attaining to the measurements of that which was built by the former. This I know, having myself also measured it, and moreover there are no underground chambers beneath, nor does a channel come from the Nile flowing to this one as to the other, in which the water coming through a conduit built for it flows round an island within, where they say that Cheops himself is laid. But for a basement he built the first course of Ethiopian stone of divers coolers, and this pyramid he made 40 feet lower than the other as regards size, building it close to the Great Pyramid. These stand upon the same hill, which is about 100 feet high. And Chephren, they said, reigned 56 years. Here then they reckon 106 years, during which they say that there was nothing but evil for the Egyptians. Fourth note, he described the first pyramid as a stepped pyramid like stairs, and this applies to the Saqqara step pyramid. And confirmation of that is that Herodotus described lifting stones with machines made of wood. If Herodotus was talking about the Great Pyramid or any of the three pyramids, this is impossible because he is describing moving stones. From the method of lifting machines is wooden, because the weight of one stone ranges from 2 tons to 15 tons. And in the king's chamber there is a piece of granite weighing 70 tons. It is unbelievable that Herodotus describes moving and lifting the stones of the pyramids using wooden tools. Herodotus is not out of his mind. It is acceptable to transport and lift stones using wood in the Saqqara step pyramid because the stones are small. Text of Herodotus' book. This pyramid was made after the manner of steps, which some called rows and others bases. And when they had first made it thus, they raised the remaining stones with machines made of short pieces of timber, raising them first from the ground to the first stage of the steps. And when the stone got up to this, it was placed upon another machine standing on the first stage. And so from this it was drawn to the second upon another machine. For as many as were the courses of the steps, so many machines there were also, or perhaps they transferred one and the same machine, made so as easily to be carried to each stage successively, in order that they might take up the stones, for let it be told in both ways, according as it is reported. However, that may be the highest parts of it were finished first, and afterwards they proceeded to finish that which came next to them. And lastly they finished the parts of it near the ground and the lowest ranges. On the pyramid it is declared in Egyptian writing how much was spent on radishes and onions and leeks for the workmen. And if I rightly remember that which the interpreter said in reading to me this inscription, a sum of 1,600 talents of silver was spent, and if this is so, how much besides is likely to have been expended upon the iron with which they worked, and upon bread and clothing for the workmen, seeing that they were building the works for the time which has been mentioned, and were occupied for no small time besides, as I suppose, in the cutting and bringing of the stones, and in working at the excavation under the ground. Fifth note, considering that Herodotus was discussing the Great Pyramids, you will find that he moved to the Black Pyramid in Dahshur without mentioning the fact that he had moved there, or even mentioning the other pyramids in Dahshur, despite the fact that the Black Pyramid is not as valuable in terms of construction as the other pyramids. Text of Herodotus' book. This king, desiring to surpass the kings of Egypt who had arisen before him, left as a memorial of hope a pyramid which he made of bricks, and on it there is an inscription carved in stone, and saying thus, despise not me in comparison with the pyramids of stone, seeing that I excel them as much as Zeus excels the other gods, for with a pole they struck into the lake, and whatever of the mud attached itself to the pole, this they gathered up and made bricks, and in such manner they finished me. Sixth note, when Herodotus compared the pyramids and Greek temples, you will find that he said that they were equal. And this is impossible because the Great Pyramids are far superior to the Greek temples, but if he compared them to the Pyramids of Dahshur, the equation would be sound in terms of equality. Text of Herodotus' book. This I saw myself, and I found it greater than words can say. For if one should put together and reckon up all the buildings, and all the great works produced by Hellenes, they would prove to be inferior in labor and expense to this labyrinth, though it is true that both the temple at Ephesus and that at Samos are works worthy of note. The pyramids also were greater than words can say, and each one of them is equal to many works of the Hellenes, great as they may be. Obviously, Herodotus did not see the great pyramids of his time, because they had not yet been built. Herodotus was the first historian to write about the pyramids in the 5th century BC. We turn to the historian Diodorus of Sicily, who visited Egypt in the 1st century BC, that is, 200 years after Alexander the Great. Diodorus Siculus saw the great pyramids after they were built. But he thought that these were the pyramids that Herodotus wrote about in his book. This is the confusion that occurred, because Diodorus will mention that there is a document of Alexander the Great building pyramids in Egypt that are larger than those found in Egypt, that is, larger. From the Pyramids of Dahshur, when he saw it, Diodorus of Sicily thought that Alexander did not build the pyramids due to lack of money. But the truth was that he was the one who built them. Read here Diodorus' reaction when he saw the Great Pyramids, unlike Herodotus the historian. Text of Diodorus the Eighth King, Chemist of Memphis. Ruled 50 years and constructed the largest of the 3 pyramids, which are numbered among the 7 wonders of the world. These pyramids, which are situated on the side of Egypt, which is towards Libya, are 120 stages from Memphis, and 45 from the Nile, and by the immensity of their structures and the skill shown in their execution they fill the beholder with wonder and astonishment. For the largest is in the form of a square and has a base length on each side of 7 plethora and a height of over 6 plethora. It also gradually tapers to the top, where each side is 6 cubits long. The entire construction is of hard stone, which is difficult to work, but lasts forever, for though no fewer than 1,000 years have elapsed, as they say, to our lifetime, or, as some writers have it, more than 3,400, the stones remain to this day still preserving their original position and the entire structure undecayed. 7. It is said that the stone was conveyed over a great distance from Arabia, and that the construction was effected by means of mounds, since cranes had not yet been invented at that time. And the most remarkable thing in the account is that, though the constructions were on such a great scale and the country round about them consists of nothing but sand, not a trace remains either of any mound or of the dressing of the stones, so that they do not have the appearance of being the slow handiwork of men, but look like a sudden creation, as though they had been made by some god and set down bodily in the surrounding sand. Certain Egyptians would make a marvel out of these things, saying that, inasmuch as the mounds were built of salt and saltpetre, when the river was let in it melted them down and completely effaced them without the intervention of man's hand. However, there is not a word of truth in this, but the entire material for the mounds, raised as they were by the labor of many hands, was returned by the same means to the place from which it came, for 360,000 men, as they say, were employed on the undertaking, and the whole structure was scarcely completed in 20 years. We still have more about Alexander the Great and the building of the Great Pyramids. Hesham Taher.